Hi guys! I'm here to sew in some clear elastic along the legs of my brief option on these fierce undies. I like to stick a pin in my elastic. You need to exercise your elastic very aggressively. And what I mean by aggressively is I pull it until I cannot pull it anymore. I would say until it feels like you're going to snap it, but I pull it after I feel like I'm going to snap it. I can pull it as hard as I can and it doesn't snap, so I would not be worried about snapping it. I just stick a pin in it where I want to start, slide it under, I put my foot down, get it nice and ready, and then carefully slide my pin out, and I hope that it stays in place. I usually start off kind of slowly, try to make sure it gets that. Now, this pair that I have, I trimmed off my 3/8 allowance, so you can see my clear elastic kind of sets in there perfectly. Okay, I'm just going to check to make sure it caught that. Okay, I don't think it caught it at the very beginning, but I think it did eventually catch it. I think that's the trickiest part about using your serger. I find it a lot easier with the sewing machine to start off exactly where I want to start off. With your serger, you're kind of a little bit blind under there. But I do highly prefer using my serger to attach the elastic. I'm going to turn off my blade since I'm not trimming any seam allowances off. That'll help me not just get any nick in there on accident. I am very loosely holding my clear elastic. You don't want it to stretch as you're attaching. Okay. So you can see this is where I pinned it, and this is where it actually started attaching. So not exactly where I wanted. Usually when I put it under there with a pin, it's pretty good about starting right away. I do find that much easier on my sewing machine, but I find my serger does a lot better at feeding it through without stretching it. On my sewing machine, as hard as I try to make sure that the elastic doesn't get stretched, I usually find that my sewing machine just really wants to ease my bottom layer in, and I like my elastic on top so that I can make sure it's aligned nicely. And my sewing machine just tends to ease in the bottom fabric more than my serger does, and so it essentially will ease my fabric into it, and then my elastic is tighter than I want it to be. Alright, I'm getting to this back booty curve where it curves out. What I'm going to do is pull my elastic taut. I'm not going to stretch it. What I usually do is I find my seam and I put about my finger just right in front of the seam, and then I pull it. It pulls it taut, but it doesn't stretch it. One reason that I don't give a measurement for clear elastic is because they all stretch differently. This is a Dritz brand and it's pretty tight. And so if I stretched it like I would a Lastine brand, which is much stretchier and thinner, this would be too tight. So that's why I really recommend just getting a feel for it. All around the front, it's just letting it feed through. You don't want to pull it at all. There shouldn't be any kind of gathering or anything. And then on the booty, you can see it's ever so slightly gathered. It's really just eased in is what it is. So that when I fold it under, you'll see all those gathers are going to disappear on my stitch line. So what we did was it curves out, so this outer line is longer than this inner line where we're actually going to have our seam line, our hem line, stitch line, excuse me. And so when we just want to pull it enough that when we tuck it under, our elastic is actually the length of the stitch line versus this very outer line. So it's a very, very slight. You don't want to pull it and gather it up. It's going to be tight and uncomfortable. And really all we're doing is stabilizing it so that you don't get saggy bottoms during the day and so that it cups under your booty. So once again, just very, very, you might call these gathers. It's really just eased in is what I would say. Okay. I'm going to repeat on this side so you can see one more time. Again, I'm going to aggressively stretch my fabric and exercise my elastic. I'm going to try this trick again, see if it works a little better for me. Stick my pin in there. And you know what, this time I'm going to stick my pin in sideways. I find that sometimes works a little bit better. Carefully pull that out. Now this time I'm starting off right on the booty. So I'm going to make sure it's got that elastic. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find my seam and put my finger just in front of it, and that's about how much I'm going to pull. You can also see if I line it up on this outer line, or I can just pull it taut where it's more of a diagonal. That's about how much we're going to stretch, because we don't want it as long as this outer line, we want it as long as the inner line. So that's another way to kind of give yourself a good percentage of stretch, is make it a diagonal line versus that curved line. The reason why I so highly recommend the Lastine brand as well is because it's so much thinner and stretchier. It's a lot more forgiving. This, the other brands that I've tried, like this Dritz and other ones that are in my local stores, there's such a little small window of stretching too much and too little. You really have to be practiced and in the muscle memory of exactly how much to pull. And so even sometimes if it's been a while since I sewed some, you know, my first pair might not be perfect because my muscle memory isn't there. But the Lastine is so much stretchier and thinner, it's just a lot more forgiving. Just like sewing, you know, sewing a more stable fabric versus sewing something that's super stretchy. It's just more forgiving on getting things perfect. So again, my front is nice and loose and eased in, not stretched at all. And then my back is just eased in a little bit. You can see the tiny bit of gathering or eased in fabric. And then when I fold that 3/8 under, and we'll just put a fake little seam line here with some pins. Those little gathers from easing in should disappear on the stitch line. So now all we have to do is hem them, and you'll be ready to wear your new Fierce Undies or gift them to whatever little one is lucky enough to have them.